Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's webinar with JCDecaux. This is our first webinar of 2023. We are joined by Kelly, Steve and Connie, and today they'll be talking through why brand building matters now more than ever, and we'll explore the critical steps you must be considering to develop a strong, sustainable business. If you have any questions, you can pop these in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to try and answer these later on in the session. And with that, we will kick off the session and I will hand over to Kelly.
Hi, thanks for that, Chloe. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are delighted that you've made the time to go through some really interesting and important learnings with us today. So my name is Kelly, and along with my colleagues Steve and Connie, we hope to take you through some key learnings on why building your brand matters now more than ever, especially building a strong and successful business. So in the next 40 minutes, we plan to go through 5 top tips on how to build your brand. We'll go through the research that backs this up and kind of explain why these tips are supported and should be considered for your marketing strategy. So as Chloe said, feel free to ask any questions using the Q&A function or the chat function at any point during this webinar. We'll do our best to answer any questions at the end of this presentation. Right, so here is our agenda for today. I'm going to give you a little more information about who JCDecaux is. We'll go through some more information about how advertising works, the best way to build a brand in today's climate, and give you a clear summary of what we've covered in today's session. Now, as I've said before, this should take us around 40 minutes. And again, feel free to use the Q&A function or the chat function to ask any questions during this webinar. So let me start by explaining a little bit more about who JCDecaux is. So JCDecaux is the world's largest out-of-home media company. And in the UK, we look after a huge number of digital screens and posters in all these environments. Out of home is everywhere. It's at the heart of communities. More importantly, there are no barriers to out of home. So by using out of home, you can reach a wide cross-section of every community. You can target different ethnic groups, people from different social backgrounds. The possibilities are really wide and varied. Now, 83% of the UK population are in cities every month. That's why our posters and screens are concentrated in the key cities of the UK. So if you want to reach your audience on a large and meaningful scale, out of home is critical in doing so. So now let's take a closer look at how advertising works in terms of best practice. The goal of all advertising is to drive consumers through this marketing funnel as quickly and as efficiently as possible, starting with raising awareness, prompting consideration, which then increases conversion to your products and services. After that, it's about keeping them engaged, turning buyers into repeat purchasers, then encouraging your customers to recommend your business and your products to others, generating new customers. Now, each stage of this marketing funnel is important and supports the next stage. And different stages of this funnel are driven by different media options. There are 4 strategies to advertising success. You've got the salient strategy, making the brand famous, gaining recognition and getting it talked about. So think about the golden M of McDonald's or the black horse for Lloyd CSB or the Go Compare opera singer who graced us with his presence at the Great British Entrepreneur Awards in November. That's the kind of thing you need to think about when thinking about salience as a strategy. Persuasion strategy, which is planting a belief in a person's brain and focusing on the benefits of the product or the service. For example, oat milk is healthy or alcohol-free beer tastes great. Then you've got affinity strategy. This is about being liked, the preferred choice, building an emotional connection. A recent example of that is in the Samsung advert, where they talk about the brand affinity of Apple iPhone customers in their recent ad for the Galaxy Flip handset. They're playing to Apple brand affinity, questioning the loyalty of traditional iPhone customers. And then you've got call to action strategy, the direct response route, driving an immediate response. So think about sale now on, or download this app to get X or Y product. To support these 4 strategies, brands have a choice of multiple advertising channels. So these multiple advertising channels are split into 2 distinct areas. You've got public marketing, which is classed as above the line, or private marketing, which is below the line. But what do we mean by public and private marketing? Private marketing is one-to-one personalized media. It's designed to encourage sales in that moment. It's tightly targeted to those consumers most likely to act on their messages now. It's highly effective for short-term sales and activation. So going back to our marketing funnel earlier, this is at the bottom area of the funnel towards the conversion end. But all this activity fails to widen a brand's reach to a larger audience. Therefore, it does not support long-term sales growth. Long-term sales growth is critical, and this is where above the line or public marketing comes into its own. So when we look at public marketing, we know it fosters long-term sales growth, it grows a market by reaching a much broader scope of potential customers, builds mass awareness, and it ensures that a brand maintains a top-of-mind positioning by making that brand stand out in a cluttered environment. Public marketing helps people to develop an emotional connection with the brand. This is so important when building long-term relationships with consumers. Failing to take public marketing into consideration limits your marketing effectiveness and long-term profitability. But with that said, we know that public marketing is being neglected by so many businesses. Today, it's private marketing like pay-per-click ads, social media, etc., that has the lion's share of advertising spend. Over 3/5 of advertising budgets are being spent on private marketing channels. But we know that it's crucial to get the right balance between branding and activation when thinking about the most successful marketing strategies. Firstly, it makes complete sense to invest in the best of both worlds. The most effective media mix needs to build brand trust, familiarity, and consideration, all while driving sales. Les Binet is an industry-leading expert in marketing effectiveness and marketing evaluation. These details on the slide are a result of his research from over 30 years, covering 80 sectors and 1,000 IPA case studies. It shows the striking the right balance between branding and activation produces long-term sales growth. The right balance consists of 40% of media investment into activation, purely driving sales, and 60% into branding, driving long-term behavioral change. So if you want to be a famous brand, it's very hard to do so using private marketing channels on their own. And even virtual brands need a real-world presence. So if you see here, only brands also understand the importance of having this real-world presence. They know that public marketing is crucial to drive their brand awareness and their strength. Everyone from Snapchat to Facebook, online TV, streaming brands, all understand the importance of speaking to consumers in public environments. They recognize the reach, the quality, and positive perception of public marketing. That's why they invest in it. If they didn't recognize this, they would probably do all of them advertising on their own platforms or other online media channels. So public and private marketing play very different but very complementary roles. So Bob Hoffman, I'll introduce you to him. He's the CEO of a very large media agency, creating sort of marketing strategies for some of the world's most successful companies. So that would include McDonald's, Toyota, Shell, Nestle, and many more. Bob's quote on this subject really summarizes why Public media, such as out of home, is key to growing a brand in the long term. Private advertising alone can't build fame. And as Bob says, it's hard to become famous in private. So now that I've given you some theories behind the roles of public and private advertising and how they should be considered in marketing strategies, I'm going to pass you on to Connie, who will explain a little more around the how.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, well, let's start at the top. Let's look at how out-of-home can help you build brand awareness. So most importantly, while we start with awareness, the goal is obviously for consumers to move through the funnel as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And to kind of showcase, I thought I'll just show you some real life examples of brands that we have worked with. So first up is Tide, which, I'm sure it's a brand that many of you know. Tide is, of course, a business bank serving largely SMEs. And they ran their first out-of-home campaign with us in 2019. So it was a fairly new medium for them. The goal was to raise brand awareness, but they really wanted to have results, have proof of concept to see what out-of-home does for the brand. So we commissioned research, and you can see here the results were super strong, with brand awareness increasing by 10%, ad awareness increasing by 13%, and consideration, so really a step further down the funnel, rose by 25% as well. Another and a very different example is Butternut Box. So, it's a direct-to-consumer fresh dog food brand. And again, they wanted to raise awareness among their target audience, which is, of course, dog owners. And they had a super interesting approach. As they are a slightly smaller brand with a slightly smaller budget, they thought, well, how can we approach out-of-home with a test-and-learn approach? And what they've done is they actually ran 2 test campaigns in slightly smaller cities, so in Edinburgh and Nottingham, to see how out-of-home works for their brand. You can see the results here. The campaign drove a 53% uplift in brand awareness, so super successful, and they since have run the same campaign on a bigger scale in London, and they're looking at expanding that nationally. So a great way to, test out-of-home for your brand and then scale up depending on your learnings. And lastly, Minor Figures. So very different brand again. Minor Figures is an oat milk brand, and they actually used to be largely sold in coffee shops. So obviously during COVID, as loads of coffee shops in the beginning were closed, they had to pivot to a direct-to-consumer business. And in order to do so, really had to raise brand awareness among a new audience. So they ran several out-of-home campaigns with us. And interestingly, it didn't just increase awareness of the brand, it also had an impact on their sales. As you can see here, Ben, the UK head of sales, was saying, they had a several 100% increase in their web traffic, and the retail rate of sale also more than doubled. So at the time, they were mainly stocked in Waitrose. Of course, they now have a much wider distribution, and we now still run campaigns with them nationally, actually, both for brand awareness, but also point of sale. And the last point on awareness, so when you're running your awareness campaigns, what is super important is that the rest of your brand, so your website or maybe your social media and your other ads, really have that same tone of voice, because actually 1 in 4 are prompted by an out-of-home campaign to go online and search for your brand. So to make the most of your out-of-home campaign, we want to make sure that everything else that you're doing is in line with that campaign as well, and we deliver the same experience to your potential customer. Next, we want to look at building trust. So why is trust important? And, how does out-of-home compare to other mediums in its ability to build trust? Firstly, why does it matter to you as a business? Well, consumers have really changed their purchase behaviors considerably over the last few years, obviously big impact of COVID. And as a result, trust became more and more important. So almost 2/3, the 60% here, are saying that trust is more important to them than ever. And actually a whole 81% are saying that trust is a deciding factor in their purchase journey, meaning that trust levels in your brand really will have a real world impact in whether someone might choose to buy from you or not. At the same time, 81% actually find it hard to know who to trust or what to trust. There's so much different information out there, which means there is a huge opportunity for brands to get it right, to take market share and acquire new customers. So how can you optimize your marketing mix to increase trust in your brand? Well, you're in luck. It's actually quite simple. You can see here on the left, public broadcasting media are seen as the most trustworthy by consumers and customers. Public broadcasting here being out-of-home advertising, which is what we do, but also TV and radio. So simply, if you start using some of those channels in your marketing mix, most likely your trust in your brand will go up. Of course, JCDecaux being an out-of-home media owner, we wanted to look more specifically at out-of-home. So really making that differentiation between out-of-home, TV, the press, as well as digital channels. And in order to do so, we did a big piece of research with another global media company called Clear Channel, and these are the results. So what we found is that out-of-home is actually the strongest media at building trust in the brand in comparison to the average of other media channels. TV became second here. However, out-of-home still outperformed TV by 5%, and it actually outperformed digital advertising. Sorry, Kelly, if you go back, thank you, by a whopping 11%. Okay, so out-of-home is absolutely the best in building trust in your brand. Secondly, customers trusted the claim made in an ad 6% more if it was done on out-of-home. Again, TV came second, however, there was still a considerable gap between the two. And lastly, we looked at consideration. So again, out-of-home, we can see a theme here, outperformed consider 5%. However, TV and social on consideration were much closer behind. So actually with consideration, we're suggesting, use out-of-home for the trust building in your brand, trust in the claim, but then you should absolutely have a mix of media in order for customers to consider your brand, maybe using TV and of course using digital marketing as well. And now another real world example, we always find them just being super useful when we speak to brands. This example is from PensionBee. If you don't know the brand, PensionBee is a pension aggregator. So it combines all your pensions in one pot, letting you easily contribute and withdraw money just using their app. And as we just learned, using out-of-home increases trust in one, the brand, and in two, the claims you make on an ad. And you can see here on the left, the claims PensionBee made specifically. And that's exactly what they saw in the results. So there's no way to better say it than just the PensionBee CMO said it here. The familiarity built by out-of-home media means that when a potential customer sees PensionBee online, we are already a trusted, familiar brand for them, and they're more likely to take positive action as a result. So meaning it's not just the brand that is more trusted, potential customers are also one step closer to consideration and really taking action online when they've already seen out-of-home beforehand. Now, a last comment, I guess, on trust given the current economic climate. So we know obviously today a lot of people are finding it pretty tough. And there's a lot of research looking at how do people make decisions in a downturn or in uncertain times. And what research shows is that people base their decisions a lot more on emotion and on sentiment. So brands who actually still communicate with their audiences during that time, whatever, regardless of what's happening in the market, are much more likely to be trusted and as a result considered by consumers. So we totally appreciate that. In a difficult market situation, brands need to really consider ROI, and a lot of them are maybe considering reshuffling their marketing budget. But what is super important, regardless of channel, is that you keep communicating with your audience. And on the third topic, it's all about gaining attention. So this is really to say, look, we can make you the most beautiful marketing plan that reaches loads of people, but we really need a campaign that people not only see, but they pay attention to, and that they will remember in order to then look up your brand or possibly make a purchase down the line. And one brilliant example of an attention-grabbing campaign is the Gut Stuff. So the Gut Stuff is an online business, or it was at the time purely an online business, that aims to empower gut health in everyone. And due to their attention-grabbing creative that you can see here, very daring, they put, pink poos on an out-of-home poster in Southwest London. They really picked up a lot of press. So they landed articles in The Guardian, for example. They were invited for an interview on Sky News. But further, with a really small budget and a very targeted campaign in Southwest London, they also achieved super impressive results. So the direct-to-consumer sales on the website actually increased by over 70%. The website users went up 165%, so huge number there. And the campaign created about 4 million Instagram impressions for them as well. And they since actually launched a TV program on the back of this as well, which I think launched on Channel 4 last night. So have a look. Now we saw a very concrete example of the gut stuff. And we know why it grabbed so much attention, but let's just step back for one moment. We want to look at, more broadly how out of home can deliver more attention to your whole campaign. So considering all channels. And in order to have a look at that, we've done some research with our research partner Lumen in 2019, looking at how an out of home campaign can impact the attention given to your mobile campaigns, whether that's social or otherwise digital. And what we found is that consumers who viewed, in this case, digital out-of-home advertising first, and then saw an advert from the same brand on mobile, looked at the mobile ads for 52% longer. And they were also 192% more likely to view the ad for more than 5 seconds. So it's just looking at your ad a lot longer increased attention. This then delivered 133% increase in spontaneous brand recall. So in a nutshell, it means if you have out of home, it will make all your other channels work a lot harder as well, because people are looking at your ads that you're retargeting on the Instagram, for example. They're looking at them for longer, they're more likely to remember them, and they're more likely to take action. And now I'll hand over to Steve.
Brilliant. Thank you, Connie. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm now going to pick up the conversation as we look at the importance of priming your audience. And priming not just for now, but also how priming your audience will play an even bigger part in the future. And even in this virtual world, I can hear you all asking why. And the reason is because third-party cookies will fall away in 2024. And what that will do is that will impact the kind of data-driven targeting and campaign effectiveness that you have online. Following some research in collaboration with Lumen, the research partners that Connie mentioned a moment ago, we were looking at potential substitutes for third-party cookies. And we were able to highlight the positive role priming your audience can play in a cookieless world. And that's what we're going to take a look at now. So, what are cookies? Unfortunately, they're not just a really good, honest comfort food. Today, we are going to look at first-party and third-party cookies. So, first-party cookies are the ones that we create when we visit a website. Their whole purpose is largely to streamline the user experience. They can only be created by the website host, and any information collected on the site that we visit about us as a user stays with the website host. Then we've got third-party cookies. So these are the ones created by anybody other than the website owner. And they want to use that data to deliver advertising. Most of these third-party cookies, I suppose, are tracking cookies. And that explains why you can search for something in the morning and then you'll see an ad appear for the same thing later on in the day. Third-party cookies will allow for cross-site tracking and collecting details of your online activity. They will allow for retargeting, so sending us an advert for products or services, stuff that we've shown an interest in before. And finally, ad serving. delivering personalized ads and collecting data to report back on ad performance. Now, when we talk about the demise of cookies, we're referring only to the third-party cookies, and that's due to happen in 2024. Now, the research that we carried out with Lumen looked to see if priming audiences could help plug the third-party cookie gap when the third-party cookies do depart. They took a group of participants, they divided them into 3 groups, and then they exposed them to ads online. So the first group was a cookied audience. So they had all of the cross-site tracking, all of the retargeting. The second group were cookieless, and they had none of the tracking or the retargeting activity. And then you had the final group, which was the primed audience. So the primed audience, they were cookieless, but they had been exposed to the advert via out of home first. And then for each group, we looked at the difference in 2 factors. We looked at awareness and click-through rates. On the left, what we're looking at first is the results around awareness. And what that showed is that cookies do work, right? They do the job. 39% of the cookied audience remembered seeing the advert, but without cookies, that then fell to 23%, which is a 40% decline in awareness. But then when we looked at the third group, the cookieless group who had been primed by out of home first, the act of priming made up for that deficit in awareness. So now, if you look on the right-hand side, we're looking at the impact of click-throughs. And we can see that the drop in awareness had a knock-on effect on that click-through rate. So the click-through rate halved without cookies. But again, the good news, priming the audience went some way to restoring that drop. In a nutshell, the removal of cookies has a huge impact. But if you prime with other media, such as out of home, you can fill this gap because it's the familiarity of the campaign and the imagery that boosts attention. You know, if you've seen something before, you're more likely to pay attention. And as I guess out of home is a 100% cookie free, it remains a future-proof channel. So what I'd like to do now is look at priming in the real world. The first is this case study from Mapai. And this is a really great illustration of what priming using out of home delivers for a brand. So they used digital out of home alongside a geo-targeted in-app campaign. And that was to drive awareness of their brand and web traffic specifically within the Birmingham area. They went on and they shared results that during the month, the digital out-of-home campaign was live. Traffic to their website from within the Birmingham area increased by over 580% in comparison to the previous month. Now, since the digital out-of-home element was the only other media channel added to the mix, they were able to directly attribute the increase in web traffic to the out-of-home activity. Essentially, it primed audiences who were then exposed to the campaign online. The second real-world example we're going to look at is Hang Loose. So Hang Loose used the power of the public and private screens working together. So out of home and mobile working side by side. The idea was to amplify the results of their overall campaign at Blue Water Shopping Mall down in Kent. So for the daredevils amongst you, fun fact, Hang Loose Blue Water, England's longest zip line, measures over 700 meters in length. You drop about 55 meters in a matter of seconds. It is not for the faint-hearted, but it is extremely good fun. Their campaign objectives were to raise awareness pre-launch, build some excitement, and then really announce the opening, a grand opening. The second stage was to keep Hang Loose front of mind in front of potential customers after opening, driving consideration amongst everybody who visited Blue Water. They also wanted to execute what we refer to as a two-screen campaign. So this was the whole piece around priming consumers across the digital out-of-home channels, and then activating a geo-targeted mobile handset campaign for retargeting across social and in-app channels. They shared that the use of public screens at Blue Water definitely primed consumers, definitely amplified their campaign, and it made it a huge success. What it really does is it supports the theory that out of home primes consumers. It supports other media, and it significantly increases performance. Priming will persuade consumers to pay more attention to your brand communications when they see it online, and attention is a golden metric. Attention is something that all brands are fighting for right now. And that then helps you to move the consumer through the marketing funnel that Kelly shared earlier on. Okay, so we're now going to look at our fifth tip. The fifth tip is all about reaching your audience at scale. A challenge that all brands have is finding and then getting in front of your target audience. And we can help maximize your campaign reach at scale without the need to impact your audience targeting. So we all know that the power of online is seen as delivering a precise, targeted message. What I'm really pleased to say is there's been a massive transformation around out of home in recent years, and that means we can now offer very similar targeting capabilities. Through programmatic delivery and using the same data sources as an online campaign, digital out of home can now replicate online audience targeting. But I guess the really interesting piece around this is that it's going to be at greater scale due to our being out in the public domain, on the high street, in the shopping mall, in the railway station, at the airport. But all the while, what we're still doing is we're making the most of the brand and the trust benefits that coordinating out of home with online will deliver. So whether it's through audience or location targeting, whether it's retargeting, whether it's using contextual or dynamic creative, digital out of home can allow advertisers to reach more of the right audience with an efficiency that's equal to online. There is also the ability to react to real time and react to events that matter to your consumers or potentially might affect the messages that you want to share. If you've got a campaign that is triggered at the right time and in the right place, it optimizes your investment in our channel. It will also make sure that your investment works as hard as possible. Now, the triggers that can support your campaign activations, well, they keep on growing. What you see here on screen is only a snapshot of what is possible. And again, I want to go back to some real world examples. And what we have coming up on the next slide is just a few examples of brands making the most of data and trigger-led activations. So top left, we have Visit Abu Dhabi. So they make the ad message relevant to its location by referencing London in its advertising. You've then got the train line on the top right. They used a slightly more complex campaign using a combination of real-time data, which included seat availability, pricing, route updates, and they optimized the campaign as it happened. So everybody standing in that main concourse looking at the screen was getting, true real-time updates. Bottom left, we have Starbucks. Starbucks, really simple campaign, but really effective. They encouraged customers to come in, you know, from the cold into the warm, have a nice coffee by activating only when it rained. And then bottom right, Pirites. So Pirites used live pollen count data to display a message only when pollen count was at its highest and those suffering really needed help. And then there's one more slide from me. So final slide for me is around the power of context. Context is the key to making any campaign work as hard as it can. The Moments of Truth study that was referenced earlier, well, it used neuroscience, eye tracking technology, and sales data to look at the effect that contextual ads had on brain response, ad recall, and sales effectiveness. So the study found that when advertising was shown in a relevant context, our brain response increased by 18%. That then translated to a 17% increase in ad recall, and that was compared to non-contextual content. But the really encouraging bit is, on average, contextual messaging led to a 16% uplift in sales. And ultimately, that's what we're all looking for. So the moral of the story: deliver the right message at the right time, in the right place, to the right audience. And with that, now I'm going to pass back to Kelly. Thank you very much for listening.
With me. Okay, so thank you. Thanks, Connie. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for giving us those great points. I'm just going to summarize some of these earlier points and go through essentially, you know, how we recommend you build your brand. So ultimately, it's all about taking a full funnel approach, driving consumers through your marketing funnel as quickly and efficiently as possible. Do not forget the critical awareness stage in your marketing strategy, as this feeds sales and inquiries in the short and long term. Out-of-home media helps build brand reputations by building trust. We already know that out-of-home is 24% higher than the average as a trusted media, right? While social and online are 28% less likely to be trusted than the average. So grabbing attention is also vital when planting a brand in a consumer's memory. If no one notices you, they can't learn anything. Priming will persuade consumers to pay more attention to your brand when they do see it online. Even more important when we lose those third-party cookies that Steve spoke about. Speaking to the right people at the right time, in the right place, minimizes wastage of your marketing budget while still allowing you to speak to your audience at scale. So investing in public and private media will amplify your overall campaign results. And that's it. So thank you so much for your time today. We really do hope you found it useful, and you'll see my email address on the screen. Feel free to reach out, argue with us if you need to, ask us any questions, and we'll be glad to get back to you in due course. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you so much. We've had a few questions come in. We've only got around 5 minutes left, so we'll see how quickly we can get through some of them. First one is from Joe, who says, great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. How much does it cost to run an out-of-home campaign?
Do you want to pick that up, Steve?
Yeah, why not? Okay. So thank you for the question, first of all. So a good out-of-home campaign needs to deliver on some really basic principles, okay? So reach, coverage, and frequency. Like any media, investment will vary based on how large an audience you want to reach, and also the length of the campaign. So if you want to make sure these basic principles aren't compromised, for your first campaign, you really want to be considering an investment anywhere between 10K to 25K for a 2 to 4 week campaign in a city. Now, regional or national campaigns will vary, but one of the great things about out of home is that we can plan to budget, And we're always happy to make suggestions on how you can make any investment work as hard as possible. So hopefully, that answers your question, gives you some food for thought.
And Steve, I'll just add something if I may. So at JCDecaux, we also actually run a program for startups and scale-ups. So the way we define it is essentially if you're venture backed, so you have investment from a VC, either seed stage until late Series B. So for those businesses, startups, we have a specific program as well for which we investment match. So if that is your business, then absolutely get in touch because you can benefit from a lot more benefits as well.
Fabulous. The next question is from Laura and it says, how do I know if out of home had worked and how can I measure this for my business?
Wow. I'll pick that up, Chloe, if you don't mind. So there's loads of ways that we can sort of monitor the effectiveness of the campaign. The primary thing we need to think about is what you're trying to achieve from the campaign. Once we know what you're trying to achieve, we'll be able to recommend the best ways of monitoring this activity. So this could be anything from commissioning a massive research study with a market research company, if the campaign is large enough to do that. You can look at things like analytics and sales data, which of course that's something you would have to give to us. We also have other ways, and again, we can share this with you after the presentation, where we've run campaigns in the past which have used things like QR codes, and we've been able to see how many people have clicked through to those QR codes. And Steve's case study earlier, which showed the campaign for Hang Loose, and they were able to see the uplifts in certain areas and click-through rates on through the mobile phone apps. There's quite a few different ways that you can research it. But once we know what your objective is, then we'll be able to recommend the best way of researching the effectiveness of the campaign. I don't know if Connie or Steve, you want to add anything to that? Do you know anything else?
No, I guess the only thing I would add to that is the last 10 years, there's been a massive growth in investment around data and insight. And also, I guess, a desire by media owners like JCDecaux to be more accountable when it comes to post-campaign analysis. And that really does help us measure the success of a campaign. So as well as measuring the impact on web traffic or sales, we can also report back to you on the audience impressions that we were scheduled to deliver versus the actual impressions that were delivered. And that's driven by third-party audience measurement experts. And the reason I think that's really important is it's, I guess, highlighting the transparency that we want to have around, I guess, not marking our own homework. So the audience that you receive is the audience that you're expecting.
And from what you've just mentioned, Steve and Kelly there, how long should a campaign run for?
Well, I guess it depends on what the campaign's meant to achieve. We would say anything, as a minimum, anything sort of 2 to 4 weeks onwards, we would recommend on out-of-home formats. But we've had, you've probably noticed that there are certain companies that are always, they take an always-on approach. Which is also highly recommended because brand awareness is something you need to kind of consistently run with. So if you think about some of the largest brands that you know of, they're always advertising, they're always pushing, they're always making sure they're in the public realm and people can see them. So, think again, McDonald's, KFC, just to give you some examples there. So, from our perspective, 2 weeks is the bare minimum, but ideally a long-term activation is a long-term marketing strategy using brand awareness and out of home is a really good way forward. And again, Steve and Connie, I'll open it up to you if you want to add anything to that.
I think you've covered it really, really well. We always stress the need for consideration around striking that right balance between a longer term campaign to build brand, remain front of mind, along with those short-term activations to drive that immediate response. I think that is the key. But, there are so many variables when it comes to planning a campaign that I don't think there is a simple answer. Instead, each campaign needs to be planned based on reaching the right audience to drive the desired response.
And again, just to add one further point, most of the, all of the campaigns that we put together are tailored. So it's all tailored and bespoke to the needs of the business we're dealing with, right? So you may have everyone, you may have a company that is, for example, running a promotional event, which has only taken place over a particular period. Or you may have a company that's always there and, needs to have a long-term presence in a particular city. It purely depends on the objectives of the campaign. So whenever, we're looking at any brief, we will recommend the durations, even the days and times of the week that a digital campaign should run for, based around what the objectives of the campaign need to be for that advertiser at that particular time.
Fab. And we are very tight on time, so I'll just ask one final question. And I have included Kelly, Connie and Steve's LinkedIn profiles in the comment section. So any questions we don't get asked today, please connect with them on LinkedIn or send Kelly an email and they'll be sure to answer that question for you. The last one, have out-of-home audiences been affected since the pandemic? And that's from Sam.
I'm happy to kick this one off, and then everybody else, please feel free to join in. So from a sheer numbers of audience perspective, we are very much back to pre-pandemic levels across roadside, rail and retail environments. In some environments, audiences are even exceeding pre-pandemic levels. But the big change, though, has been around audience behaviours and trends. I think, on the back of the pandemic, we've had to sit back, take stock, think about how the world has changed. So as an example, we've seen in the change in the way that we travel through the rail network. Pre-pandemic, Monday to Friday, early mornings and then early evenings were typical peak commuter hours. Post-pandemic, we've seen a shift in that behaviour, and that's driven by a mixture of hybrid working, flexible working hours. So the audience numbers are still the same, but the flow of commuters through stations is now much more fluid throughout the day. And then, looking at high streets, the high streets did empty during the pandemic. And there were some that questioned whether they would ever really recover. Would the online shopping experience finally take over? We carried out another piece of research, and I've not got these slides in front of me, but we tracked audiences in 2022, and then we compared that to 2019. And what we saw was that high street footfall habits were pretty much the same. There was a small shift on Mondays and Fridays, and by small, I think it was like 0.5%. But Tuesdays to Thursdays were back to normal numbers. Now, personally, I think, again, that's a reflective of the fact that we have hybrid working. We're in the office Tuesday to Thursday, at home Mondays and Fridays. What was really interesting, though, is when you got to the weekend, the footfall in high streets has actually grown. Now, I think it's generally considered that is a residual effect of all of that pent-up demand to get back outside of the house. We were told for so long we couldn't, now we are. There is loads of data that we can share at a national, regional or city-wide level, around footfall, around out-of-home audiences. So please feel free to reach out and we will happily share.
And sorry, Chloe, I was just going to say, I think there's one really interesting question actually in the chat. So I think that probably is worth picking up just for a moment. I don't know if everyone can see it. It says, are you guys pushing out of home advertising because you're seeing a decline in uptake, considering cheaper alternatives such as PPC and paid social media ads that are widely available, easy to use and financially accessible for SMEs? And there's maybe, I think, two things to say on that are super important. So first, if you remember what Kelly shared about the balance between brand advertising and kind of digital advertising, really further down the funnel, right? It says 60% brand, 40% further down the funnel. However, we kind of fully appreciate that depending, that was among the biggest brands worldwide. So we appreciate if you're an SME or a startup, that balance might be skewed in the beginning a bit the other way. So definitely use all those channels and test. So test your audience, who is your audience, test your product market fit, test different messaging, different creatives. Like that is all amazing stuff that you can do on those channels, and really make sure you nail that. And then when you have that nailed, and often, either have it nailed and you want to take it to the next step, or if you've been investing more and more money in it, but eventually you maybe see a kind of decline in return on investment. Sometimes what we hear a lot at the moment, like Facebook with, you can be less targeted now. So brands investing more and more to Facebook are not necessarily getting more back. So that's more where we come in, not to tell you to stop doing that, but to see what else can you do. And out of home is one option. And the last point on that is, some big brands, if we look at them again, if you just Google Airbnb and what they've done over the last few years, that's exactly what they found, that all the digital marketing, they're still doing that, but actually just putting more and more money on it wasn't increasing their return. So they had now balanced it out of it, investing more in brand while still doing all the digital marketing. And that really has helped their performance. So I think really good question, but it's about just bringing the channels together rather than pitching them against each other.
I absolutely agree, Connie. I think that last year there was an increase in the use of out of home. There's forecasts again that there will be increase in use of out of home again. And I think the reason for that is there is a growing knowledge and understanding around how multimedia campaigns, multi-channel campaigns will see one amplify the other, whether that's out of home and online, out of home with TV and online. So we're not going to sit here and say it's only out of home. We should be considered as part of a wider media mix to create the most effective campaign possible.
I agree with that. And it's also worth bearing in mind that people's habits are multidimensional, if you like. So, one of the points I was going to raise earlier when Steve was talking about the audiences and the audiences returning, for example, in the mall environment, what we've found is when people are buying stuff online and doing the click and collect, that's actually even had an impact on how many sales have been happening and how it's increased footfall in shopping malls, because as people go and, pick up their products, 84% of them actually went on to continue to shop in the shopping mall as well. So, this whole presentation isn't about telling anybody to stop their online media strategy, but just going back to what, one of the slides I showed you earlier with the likes of Snapchat and other online platforms, they understand the importance of having a real world branding presence. And that's what this sort of presentation went through. If pay-per-click and all of these online social media platforms were successful in their own right and can do the whole job for you, they would just do that and nothing else. They would just Facebook would just advertise themselves on their own platform all the time, and they wouldn't do any out of home. So it's clear when you're looking at the variety of digital media platforms that also advertise on out of home, that there is something to be said about having a balance between branding and generating that, that direct response through private mediums or private marketing channels like social and PPC. There has to be a balance of both. And that's what we hope we went through with everybody today. But yeah, any further questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Amazing. Well, just to let everybody know, the session has been recorded and will be available on demand later on today. So you'll receive an email with a link for that. But just before we finish, Kelly, Steve and Connie, thank you so much for joining us. Just want to see if you had any final words before we finish.
No, not really. I think we may have, hopefully we've covered everything. Like I said, really open to any questions, any queries. As Connie mentioned, we have a variety of programs that can help SMEs and business startups. Connie works in our Nurture program, which helps SMEs in terms of investment matching and a variety of other things. We also have programs to help any companies that are focused on sustainability and environmental issues. We have another program for any companies that are ethnically owned or want to target people from ethnic minorities. The possibilities are endless. So have a conversation with us, even if you feel like you may be too small or you may not be able to access out of home. Let's just have a chat and see what we can do, and we'll be able to kind of point you in the right direction.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.